I'm not sure there's been a team that is going to improve as much as I think Oklahoma has a chance to improve this year. Hello and welcome. It's Always College Football. Today is Thursday, April 24th, and we are kicking off the NFL draft in style with some college football content. We are going to be the only college football show that will not intermingle the NFL draft and college football, because I happen to think they live in silos. I love the blend. I love the NFL draft, by the way, but I don't know how much the college fan, the diehard college fan, wants to hear about the mock draft projections of Shedeur Sanders. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you can let us know and we will adjust for next year to see whether or not we need to cover the draft a little bit more. So we're kind of staying in our lane here, and it's kind of weird because every single video I see pretty much all over the entire web is about the NFL draft and the projections for tonight's first round. So I'll be tuning in. I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be awesome, and look forward to seeing where these great college players that we covered the last couple of years, where they end up. But today's show is about college football. We're going to talk about kind of a sneaky, interesting story that is coming out of Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we're starting to entertain the possibility of schools recouping NIL from players. That's interesting. We have a couple of spring games from last week, and one is from Texas A&M, one is from South Carolina. I decided to go maybe just a touch further with those two teams. I don't feel like we've talked about them enough. And those are two teams that are sneaky dangerous coming into this upcoming season. I feel really, really good about one of those two teams maybe making quite a bit of noise. And it might not be the one that you expect me to talk about. We also need to dive into what's going on right now in Dallas-Fort Worth, where all the conference commissioners are meeting in a room for 3 days to talk about the future of the college football playoff. We'll give you some up-to-date moments from that. And then at the end, we'll do just a little bit of a dive into three teams that have been kind of flying under the radar, but in doing a great job in the transfer portal. We're going to dive into those teams as well. So we'll kick things off with a story that could have a pretty significant impact on the landscape of college football, and that's buyouts and NIL. So 2 hours after a freshman quarterback named Madden Iamaleava decided to enter the transfer portal on Tuesday, a pretty significant thing went down when it comes to Arkansas football. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, Madden Iamaleava, I know that name. Yes, that is Nico's brother. The same Nico that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, the former Tennessee quarterback turned UCLA quarterback. Well, his brother Madden decided to follow him after the fact. So if you're new to what's gone down here in the last couple of days, that's the update. We're not talking any more about it. But what's new about this conversation is that the AD from Arkansas, Hunter Yurachek, decided to go out and kind of make a statement that was directed towards players, saying that you are now responsible for paying your NIL buyout, or you might open yourself up to potential legal ramifications. Now, it's what Hunter Yurachek said for the most part, and this is fascinating because this now, and I will admit, before we dive into the weeds here, I'm not going to try to sit here and tell you lawyer speak. I'm not going to try to sit here and preach to you as to who's right, who's wrong. There are really educated people on both sides of this argument. I'm not going to try to tell you what should happen in the court of law, but just from my vantage point, this, I think, could have some staying power. And it could actually serve as an opportunity for the schools to push back just a little bit on the freedom of movement that these players have had over the last few years. Right now, you guys know, if you've been following the sport, you can know that players can enter the transfer portal if they've graduated at any point. They can also enter the transfer portal for the 15 days that are available to them in December. They also have the opportunity in April to enter for a 10-day period. So there's massive windows, nearly 30 days, in which players can enter the portal throughout the course of the season. And that, I think, has been challenging because these schools are operating under the assumption that this player is going to be on their roster. So if that player leaves, then the school's hung out to dry, and they might not be able to go and get somebody to backfill that player because they either don't have a quality player in the portal that they can go after, or their resources have been already accounted for, or whatever the circumstances may be. It puts the schools in a very difficult spot. All right. So players that enroll all over the country in January, they sign, in some cases, NIL deals that pay them week to week. In some cases, it's month to month. And in some really obscure cases, guys are getting signing bonuses to sign at specific schools. Now, in the NFL, you sign a signing bonus. Let's just say, for simple math purposes, you sign a 5-year deal worth $5 million and a $1 million signing bonus. Well, that $1 million, if you're cut after year one, then that's going to result in $800,000 worth of dead cap money for that NFL franchise, right? It protects the player because he gets money up front. It also protects the franchise if the player doesn't do what they do. And there's some dead cap money that could be involved, but that can be all kind of figured out and renegotiated and all this other stuff, right? But if you look at schools like Arkansas, they now put buyout language in their NIL deals. And while the NIL era is pretty new and it's taken a little time to figure out the best language to put into the contract, buyout language being in the NIL could be really advantageous to keep players engaged at whatever school that they signed up with to begin with. Now, hundreds of players have ignored buyout language pretty much forever because everyone's waiting for this House settlement and the NCAA settlement, and that's supposed to take effect here on July 1st. And at that point, things will hopefully calm down. But there are questions right now about whether or not these NIL contracts are legal. There's also questions as to whether or not these contracts are legally binding. Because if they're legally binding, then programs might be open to pursue legal remedies. And those legal remedies would be recouping funds that were paid out to the player that they expected to be on the roster. Now, a lot of these things are structured usually where the guys are going to get paid the most money during the season, right? That's when they're really needed. And they make, pennies on the dollar between January and August. But come August through December, that's when their peak earning is in their NIL contracts. But it's not like that all the time. So a lot of teams have been really reluctant to go after players that leave them high and dry because it would be bad optics. It would lead to really negative headlines. But it seems like things are starting to change a little bit now. Now, according to sources, Madden Iamaleava signed a deal that would pay around $500,000 back in the winter when he was coming out of high school. That was with Arkansas. That was with the Arkansas Edge Collective. Now, those payouts had been initiated, and according to people that are familiar with the contracts that Arkansas is using, the language requires players to reimburse 50% of the money remaining on their deal should they leave for another school. That's according to people that are very familiar with this at CBS Sports. So crediting CBS Sports with all this incredible investigative work. They did an amazing job. Really a great job. So if you think about 8 months remaining on nearly a $500,000 contract, probably looking at a possible 6-figure buyout. Now, will Arkansas pursue this? We'll find out. If they do, will the Iamaleava team have to repay this money, or did they just let it go and move on to the next? But these are aspects of this contract language that are probably going to be used in the future, and they probably should be. Because while we always cite constantly, well, coaches have the freedom to go wherever they want. Yeah, but not without consequences of having to pay back financially what was owed to their previous institution. So when an offensive coordinator, let's just say Jeff Grimes, decides to go from Kansas to Wisconsin, Kansas is going to be paid a sum of money because there was a buyout clause within his contract. When any of these schools hire a coach from some other place and they're still under contracts at their previous place, money is paid back to the previous institution. So it probably should be that way when it comes to players as well. And this would limit the amount of movement that these players are doing and protect the school just a little bit from bad situations where guys leave them at the altar on their wedding day. Now, we don't do this a ton this time of year. We certainly won't jump to conclusions about what teams are going to be this upcoming fall, but we kind of tell you where they're trending in my eyes. That's what we at least try to do. And we use some spring game evaluations, spring game reports, insider sources to kind of jump to some conclusions. So we figured we'd do that with a couple teams that took the field last week. We just haven't had a chance to quite get to the depth of what these teams might be. But we will start with the Texas A&M Aggies. And guys, I'm starting to warm up to the idea that Texas A&M is flying under the radar in a really big way this upcoming year. One reason why is that Mike Elko is heading into year number 2. Last year, he was kind of learning on the fly. And I thought they were pretty good last year. We'll talk about kind of what went down as the season went along. But last year for A&M was a pretty good year, all things considered. You had to go with a freshman quarterback. Your starting quarterback was out of the lineup early in the year. He got replaced. You have new coordinator that is unfamiliar with the SEC at offensive coordinator with Colin Klein. So he had to kind of figure things out as things went along. And as a result, the team offensively had different identities almost week to week. I don't think that'll be the case this year. I think it's pretty clear that Colin Klein's got himself a quarterback in Marcel Reed. Now, if you look at where Marcel Reed is trending and you look at where he was in the spring last year, remember, he wasn't getting a lion's share of the reps. There was an incumbent starter that was getting a lion's share of the reps. Marcel Reed was getting mostly the 2s, but had to battle for the 2 job. And as a result, he probably wasn't necessarily put in the best situation to be the starting quarterback in 2024. While he became the best option at the position, I think this is a year where he could be poised for a significant leap this upcoming season. I also think if you look at his supporting cast and how it's improved around him, they did a great job in the portal going out and landing a former Mississippi State player in Mario Craver who looked good and looked like he had developed a bit of a rapport with Marcel Reed in the spring. They also went out and got one of my favorite players in the portal in NC State transfer Casey Concepcion, who's really versatile, can do a lot of big things. And I'm really optimistic about how he could fit in this offense and take some short passes, take him the distance with a good complement of weapons around him as well. Because at NC State, Casey Concepcion at times is kind of a one-man show offensively. Well, now that there's other guys that have to be defended and focus needs to be paid attention to those guys as well, Concepcion might be poised for his best season ever. But the thing that I was most concerned about with Texas A&M's evaluation this year was how would they replace some of the personnel on defense? That was the big question for me, because if you look at their personnel along the defensive line in particular, that group was ridiculous at times last year. Scorton, Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, like those guys at times completely took over the game. And it might have been Turner one week, Stewart the next, Scorton the week after that, Scorton again the week after that. It's kind of anybody's guess who was going to be the guy that week. But I was worried a little bit about them being able to adequately replace that presence up front they had last year. And then I started to watch Cassius Howell. And I'm starting to see that this group and some of the portal additions that they've made along the defensive line, this group might not drop off very much from where they were a year ago. Now, Cassius Howell is expected to be the bell cow and appears like he's taking that role on. And he's welcoming that challenge of being a dominant force along the defensive line. He looks bigger. He appears to be the vocal leader for the guys on that side of the ball and is kind of increasing the standard on that side too. So Cassius Howell is a name that everyone needs to remember when thinking about the Aggies this upcoming fall. You also need to remember the name TJ Searcy, who is a former defensive end of Florida. He looked like he has a chance to be pretty disruptive. So while the production that I thought was going to be impossible to replace, they might have not just replaced that group, but you replace that group with a pretty significant chip on their shoulder with a lot of guys that have an awful lot to prove. So I'm pretty excited about year 2 for Mike Elko. I'm excited about the offense in year 2 for Colin Klein, year 2 for Marcel Reed. But I think the defense is what could get this team to the next level, because the offense will be improved. But if the defense doesn't drop off, they should be in a really good spot. Because if you look at last year, man, they just couldn't finish at the end of the year. The final month of the regular season, You get crushed by South Carolina, but that was an impossible situation coming off the LSU game the week before. You come up short in quadruple overtime against Auburn, and that was kind of a weird game where you ended up having to throw it all over the yard. You lose to Texas because you just couldn't quite get things going offensively, and that was going to be a tough game for them to win. So obviously things didn't go very well, and then you give up the big comeback there after a big lead in the third quarter against USC in the bowl game, and now you're left kind of feeling like last year was a missed opportunity. But if you look at their schedule, guys, they only go on the road one time in the first 6 weeks of the season. That's at Notre Dame. That'll be a very difficult game, but you get a couple nice tests early against UTSA, Utah State before you go to South Bend. Maybe at that point, Notre Dame is still trying to figure things out around a new quarterback. Then you have a 3-game home stretch with Auburn, Mississippi State, and Florida following that road trip to Notre Dame. And here's the tough stretch for the most part when looking at this A&M roster. All right, you're at this schedule, You're at Arkansas on October 18th, you're at LSU, and you're at Missouri. Those are 3 straight games. Now, not 3 straight weeks, but 3 straight games in which they were away from Kyle Field before coming home against South Carolina and Samford, and then finishing up on the road in Austin. You really look at the schedule, though. I mean, the LSU game is going to be extremely difficult. At Notre Dame is going to be extremely tough. At Texas is going to be extremely tough. But tell me another game on that schedule that is not winnable for the Texas A&M Aggies. I'll wait, because I think this team could very easily be 9-3 at season's end. And right now, here we are in April, and nobody's talking about the Aggies potentially being a fringe playoff contender. I'm not saying I'm putting them in the playoff. I'm just saying they might be in the mix come week 6, 7, 8, 9 with a really good record if they can take care of business at home. Moving over to another team that is on that Aggie schedule, and that's South Carolina. Now, South Carolina had a remarkable season last year. I mean, it's hard to quantify just how good a year that was for Shane Beamer and his staff. They identified some superstars in the making. You got Dylan Stewart on defense, who's going to be amazing. And I think Lenora Sellers has as bright a future at the quarterback spot as anybody in the Southeastern Conference. So I am super bullish on his development. And if they can improve the supporting cast around him at wide receiver, I feel really confident in him being a top flight quarterback, not just in the SEC next year, but maybe in the country next year. But they do have some pieces that they must replace on the defensive side. Top being Kyle Kennard, who went on to have 11.5 sacks last year. That combination of Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart was the most ferocious pass rush in the entire SEC. And I see a lot of preseason prognostications that are suggesting that South Carolina might actually be better this upcoming season than they were last year. And I think those people that are jumping to that conclusion might want to hold their horses just a little bit. Now, I'm pretty optimistic in Lenora Sellers' development. I'm optimistic in the offense being good as a whole. But the defense, guys, I don't know how the defense is going to adequately replace all the pieces that were lost off last year, because I've already referenced Kyle Kennard, 11.5 sacks at defensive end, but that is just one of 5 guys that are lost in the front defensively. You also lose a graduate in Tonka Hemingway, TJ Sanders, DeAndre Jules, Alex Boogie Huntley. On the second level, you got Debo Williams, Demetrius White, who played a million snaps of football and high-level football to go along with Bam Martin Scott. Then in the back end, you lose Nick Emanwari, who's one of the best safeties in the country, and O'Donnell Fortune, who is pretty good at corner for South Carolina. That's 10 guys that were all very, very good. When their numbers were called, those guys made plays, and not only were they good, but they were veterans. A lot of those guys were 4th, 5th, in some cases 6th-year seniors. So a lot of people are pointing at, well, Lenora Sellers is back, they'll be great. I think that's a great starting point, but I think there's more questions surrounding the South Carolina team that need to be addressed before I'm willing to put them in the preseason top 10. I got to know what's going on at wide receiver. I think the biggest question at wide receiver is, what about Van Jacobs? Is he a go-to guy? Is he a guy in the spring game, by the way, at 85 yards? Maybe he is. Maybe he is that guy. You got Brian Rowe, who led all receivers in receptions. He had 5 catches in the game. There's always the anomaly in Nick Harbor And we've been talking about Nick Harbor now forever, and how big he is and how physical, how impressive he is getting off the bus. That impressive build, size, speed combination has not yet translated to top flight productivity. And while he's amazing to play with on the video game, he's incredible. He's uncoverable. The guy is maybe the best player on the video game. That isn't real life. I haven't seen that version of Nick Harbor yet. So maybe it's in there. Maybe it will come to the forefront. But until it does, I still have legitimate questions about what this passing attack is going to look like. So I think there's things to figure out right now with South Carolina. And as I'm watching and studying and learning more about them, I think there's more questions than answers right now, especially on the defensive side coming back for the Gamecocks. Another team formerly of the SEC East, that's the Tennessee Volunteers. Of course, the SEC East is no more. Tennessee has gotten themselves a new quarterback. And now Joey Aguilar, I'm sure if you've been following the chaos surrounding Tennessee's quarterback situation, you probably have familiarized yourself with the fact that Nico Iamaleava transferred to UCLA. Joey Aguilar just so happened to be at UCLA. He now has transferred back to Tennessee. Now, this is kind of interesting because Aguilar is a guy that I have a ton of respect for a few different reasons. One, the guy was given no flowers as a prospect coming out of high school. He was an unranked prospect. He didn't have any stars next to his name. He started his college at community college at Diablo Valley Community College. It's about 30 minutes away from his hometown in Oakley, California, which is up in the Bay Area. So this is a guy that went out and did a pretty dang good job in JUCO. He was a top 179 JUCO player. That was in 2023. Transfers to App State. Very few were throwing a parade upon his arrival, but he gets to App State. He's there in Boone and has an unbelievable 2023 season. I mean, he completed 64% of his passes, went for over 3,700 yards, 33-10 touchdown interception ratio, and added about 250 on the ground with a couple scores as well. Now, that was 2 years ago. It was not quite as good last year. And what was interesting is that this was an App team that had a bunch of pieces back, including Aguilar, but a lot of receivers, some guys back along the front. The head coach, Sean Clark, as a result of the 5-6 season, was actually let go, and it wasn't quite as good. But if you look at the reasons why, offensively, yes, Aguilar's stats weren't quite where you want them to be in 2024 compared to 23. He regressed in those areas. Completion percentage was down, interceptions were up, touchdowns were down, yards per attempt was down. So yes, he regressed statistically, but the reason why App State struggled so badly last year was because of their defense. Their defense was a huge problem. They were 114th out of 133 nationally in scoring defense allowed. They gave up nearly 33 points a game. So I'm not going to pin that on Aguilar. That's Aguilar reading the room, recognizing I got to go score point for point because that's the only chance we have. So I'm going to take some risks that I don't really want to take, but I'm going to have to take them because my defense can't stop a nosebleed. So I think this is a great pickup for Tennessee. Now, skill set wise, he doesn't have as much natural ability as Nico Iamaleava. That's fine. By the way, few people have as much natural ability as Nico Iamaleava. That's fine. What I need a guy that's going to make really good, quick, crisp decisions, that's tough as nails, and can stand behind an offensive line that's got to figure a couple things out, and that can be accurate. And that, by the way, has seen real bullets fly. And Aguilar, with his 2 years in JUCO, 2 years at App State, this guy has played a lot of football. So I think this is the best possible situation for Tennessee, barring someone completely unforeseen that wanted to hop in the portal. I think this is a great situation for Tennessee to bridge the gap to one of their talented freshmen. Whether that's Merklinger or McIntyre, those guys are the future. Or maybe the next man up, whoever they recruit next year, maybe they're the future. But Aguilar, I think, is a great option to bridge from last year to this year without allowing the levee to potentially break. Now, do I have super high hopes for Tennessee this year? Not crazy high hopes, but I think my hopes are significantly higher with Aguilar having played as much football as he's played than they would be with an unproven, untested freshman that might have a lot of ability, but hasn't seen the chaos that the SEC might throw at them on a week-to-week basis. So I love this pickup for Josh Heupel, and I hope it works out for him, given what just went down with his previous quarterback. Anytime there's anything about the college football playoff, it's very seldom that it's the third topic on the show. So today, we are putting the college football playoff meetings that are currently going on in Dallas, Texas, as the third topic on the show, which is really backwards. But I think, like y'all as a consumer, I'm kind of over it. I don't know if you guys see it the same way. I'm kind of over it. Just if you guys are going to change stuff, just tell me. Like if you're not going to change stuff, I'm great with that too. That's fine. Just let me know who's playing where, at what time, what bowl games we need to watch, and where I need to be to go call the 2, 3, or 4 that we're calling. We're good. All right. But because we have a lot of people that are interested in what's going on with the college football playoff, we will give you an update as to what's going on with the meeting this week. You have a bunch of different conference commissioners that are meeting in a meeting room in a hotel conference booth in Dallas, Texas. And they're trying to figure out, all right, what does the college football playoff look like this year? And then ultimately, how do they position themselves for success, or in some cases, continuity in 2026 and beyond? Because remember, in 2026 regular season, that's when the playoff could look very, very different. And there are 3 major priorities for this meeting this upcoming week. And what's funny is this is actually the 4th meeting that the college football playoff commissioners, leaders, it's the 4th meeting that they've had. But this is one that is kind of all encompassing, and we're kind of getting down to the point where we got to make some decisions, especially about the playoff format this upcoming season. So the 3 things that are the highest priority. Number 1, seeding, which was a hot topic of debate last year. Will they decide to adjust the 2025 bracket to just have a straight seeding model that takes teams and ranks them 1 through 12, regardless of what their conference championship situation is? Now, Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, they've both been very outspoken about seeding teams 1 through 12. And I don't blame them, by the way, because if you look at how things went last year, did it make sense that Boise State gets a first-round bye? Did it make sense that Arizona State got a first-round bye? Based on who they played, how they played, strength of schedule, strength of record, resume, all these other things. Were they really one of the top 4 teams? Probably not. And frankly, is a bye really in your best interest? That's a conversation for a different day. But I think Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, they want to adopt just a straight seeding model. That means that teams 1 through 12, regardless of what they did in their conference championship, would be ranked accordingly. So if we look at last year, the straight seeding model would have given first-round byes to Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. Georgia winning the SEC, Oregon winning the Big Ten, Texas losing the SEC championship, Penn State losing the Big Ten championship. So the one of the areas where people are kind of confused with this, though, is, well, the SEC and the Big Ten, they just want to do that for money. It's not really about money in this case, because the commissioners, they've all agreed that here in this 2025 season, that if seeding changes happens, it doesn't affect how much money the 4 highest ranked conference champions would actually get. Every conference champion, those top 4 conference champions, are going to get a $4 million bonus regardless of whether or not they receive the first round bye. So that's already agreed to. What this does is it really just rewards the teams that played a tougher schedule by giving them that first round bye and not forcing them to play against a team that didn't have to play a conference championship game against a team that did. Now, the ACC and the Big 12, these are the commissioners, Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark, respectively. They have been very outspoken about making sure that any changes that go down this year are actually going to be extended beyond this year, just so that there can be some consistency from the old playoff format to the new playoff format and to the future playoff format, because there is a possibility that we have a different playoff model for 4 consecutive years in 23, 24, 25, and 26. So that's not good for the sport, according to the ACC and the Big 12. But to me, like I said beforehand, I don't really care as long as I get it right. And in my opinion, straight seeding, it makes the most sense. It's not that difficult, I don't think. Straight seeding makes the most sense. We move on. The other thing that they're going to be talking about, so item number 2 on the table is, what are they going to do about who runs the college football playoff? Governance, and who has the most say. So this will be really interesting, because a couple years back, the Big Ten and the SEC, they basically made a power play saying that they're kind of in charge. Whether you like it or not, basically the Big Ten and the SEC can kind of do what they want, and everyone else is kind of along for the ride. Now, the conferences in Notre Dame, they decided to sign a memorandum of understanding that would give a majority of the college football playoff revenue and decision-making power to the Big Ten. So regardless of how many teams from those leagues actually make the CFP. So they only have to take, quote, consideration from everybody else. Now, that MOU was quickly adopted. ESPN and CFP announced a deal, and with all the money and the decision-making processes kind of tied up, how much do the SEC and the Big Ten want to flex is the real question. Because if they decide to flex, it will lead us to our next conversation, and that is item number 3 on the docket, and that is the future of the college football playoff format. Now, here's what's going to be very interesting is right now we sit at 12 teams. Do they really want to go to 14? Do they want to go to 16? And do we want to start to get comfortable with the idea of an automatic qualifier, multiple automatic qualifiers, as many as 4 to the Big Ten and to the SEC? Now, Tony Petitti, he's the commissioner of the Big Ten. He's the one that is actively pushing the idea of a 4-4, 2-2, 1-1 college football playoff model. So if you're curious what that 4-4 is, 4 automatic bids for the SEC and the Big Ten, 2 automatic bids for the Big 12 and the ACC, 1 automatic bid for the G5, and then 1 automatic bid to an at-large, but under the stipulation of understanding that it could be Notre Dame if Notre Dame finishes in the top 12. So he's the kind of the catalyst behind this. And if you look at 2026, I don't think that they're in a huge hurry right now to kind of flush this out, because I got to be honest, I don't think the automatic bid decision is a very popular one right now. I don't think fans want it. I think fans feel as though the race for 5th place versus 4th place within a conference of 16 teams feels a little bit manufactured. So I'm not really a fan. Like, to me, it's making things far too complicated. I personally would prefer to just rank teams 1 through 12, 1 through 14, 1 through 16. But what I would suggest are tweaks to how we evaluate these teams. So I don't want to give multiple bids necessarily, but what I want to make sure that we figure out is, let's get rid of some of the subjectivity that it comes with evaluating these teams. Like, I don't want to see teams that didn't play anybody get rewarded with a playoff spot because they have a good record. If your team played 2 FCS schools, a 2-10 G5 team, and a 4-8 P5 team, and then beat up on a bad conference, should you be rewarded if you run through that schedule with a 10-2 record with the playoff spot? No. I think we are capable as college football fans to go beyond the win-loss record. To me, I think we should be rewarding teams that played difficult schedules. And if they lose a game because they challenge themselves out of conference, good. That's what we want. We want more difficult games. We want more marquee matchups. So, for instance, when Michigan is playing Oklahoma this year, let's say Michigan beats Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is sitting there at the season's end. Michigan's a playoff team. Oklahoma's sitting there season's end with a 9-3 record, and they're being measured against a 10-2 team from, say, the ACC that didn't play anybody, but they're 10-2, and Oklahoma's 9-3, but Oklahoma has the loss to Michigan, whereas the team that's 10-2 didn't play a soul in the non-conference. I think we should reward Oklahoma over the team that didn't challenge themselves. Like, that should be a priority moving forward, and I hope that we can look beyond the predetermined bids, we can look beyond the win-loss record, and we can start to realize that there is a lot more to the evaluation process that can be kind of ironed out before we start giving all these guarantees. So let's reward teams for strength of schedule. Let's reward teams for strength of record. Let's reward teams for non-conference records. Let's reward teams for having challenged themselves in the non-conference, for having gone on the road in the non-conference. Let's figure out the selection process before we start giving out automatic bids, because I do believe that automatic bids could be a turnoff for a lot of fans that just don't understand why we're giving out, quote, participation trophies for those teams that are finishing 4th and 5th in the SEC and the Big Ten. I want to go into just a couple schools we don't talk about very often here on the show. One, we do, Oklahoma. We talk about them a lot, but we don't talk a lot of North Carolina, and we don't talk a lot of Oklahoma State, but want to make sure that we tip our cap to what's going on at a few different places here at the end of the show. Now, North Carolina, want to give them a little credit for going out and getting South Alabama's Gio Lopez. Now, this guy's a lefty. I think he's a really solid addition for Bill Belichick and what he's going to try to be their first year. Now, redshirt freshman, was in the Sun Belt and threw for over 3,000 yards. Still has 3 years of eligibility left too. So the sky might be the limit for this young man. And you kind of go through spring ball. You had the Brown transfer from Purdue. Now he's back. Kind of needed a quarterback. You had only 2 scholarship passers on the roster this past year. So this was massive for Bill Belichick to bring in a guy with starting experience and a guy that has, I think, a chance to be a pretty good high-level ACC player. You also go out and land one of the better linebackers in Mekhi Beyer, a 16-game starter at Nebraska. And you also go out and get Penn State's Smith Vilbert, who is a veteran, solid depth piece there at defensive end behind Abdul Carter, but had some quality minutes. If not for Abdul Carter, Smith Vilbert might have had a pretty dang good season there for Penn State. Long story short, Michael Lombardi and company, the GM and Bill Belichick, they've done a pretty good job, man. They've had 16 players on scholarship that are transferring out in the month of April. So there's been quite a bit of turnover, but they've been able to backfill it with decent pieces that have significant starting and playing experience. There's one piece that is up for debate right now, and that is their defensive end. That's Bo Atkinson. I don't think he's going to be a likely candidate to return to Chapel Hill because he's probably the top player available in the portal right now. He's 6'6", 265. He's got some pass rush. He can play 3-4. He can play 4-3. Had 7.5 sacks last year. So their new defensive scheme isn't ideal for what he wants to be, but he's going to have his pick of the litter because Georgia's probably on him. Ohio State is on him, a handful of others. So he's going to be in a good spot. So that's the one piece that was lost that I don't think can be replaced. But all in all, North Carolina's had a pretty good first semester with the new head coach, Bill Belichick. I'm not sure there's been a team that is going to improve as much as I think Oklahoma has a chance to improve this year. I think Oklahoma is poised for a significant jump in wins. I think Oklahoma's poised to have some breakthrough candidates at multiple different positions. And their new GM, Jim Nagy, is off to a tremendous start. Now, they had a bit of a need at depth at running back, And I think they got one of the best running backs in the entire country by bringing in Cal's Jaden Ott. He was the leading rusher in 2023, was one of the top players in the spring transfer portal, was banged up throughout most of last year, but when this guy's good and feeling good, he's one of the best backs in the country. So Jaden Ott, he can contribute in the passing game too, but he's a hammer. Now, he runs hard, and it's going to be really impressive to see him alongside John Mateer in the backfield. I think John Mateer has a chance to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They also go out and you get a Stanford center, is a transfer that's likely a plug-and-play starter in Jake McCullough, and still trying to find some help at a few other positions. But if you look at how they were able to bring back David Stone, convinced him to stay at home, adding Jaden Ott, continuing to bring in guys that can be potential starters for them along the line of scrimmage, and knowing what they already have coming back on defense, guys, I'm telling you, I think Oklahoma's a sleeper. I think they're a sleeper going into this year, and we need to start paying attention. Keeping it in Bedlam, we're going to slide over to Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma State has not traditionally been a team that's going to go out and just write a huge check in the portal. It's not really been the way they've operated in the past. But clearly Mike Gundy's kind of feeling the need to maybe thrust things into overdrive after what was a really disappointing 3-9 campaign last year, because his roster is completely unfamiliar with compared to what we saw last year. Last year, we loved Oklahoma State going into the season because there was continuity. You had quarterback familiarity. You had running back that won the Doak Walker. You had 5 guys back along the offense. You had second-year defensive coordinator bump. Like, there were so many things to like about Oklahoma State because there was so much that was the same from a breakthrough season the year before. And then it all fell apart. So everything this year is turning over. It's completely new. You have a brand new coaching staff. They've been super aggressive in going out and trying to add guys in the portal. They've gone out and added a running back in Freddie Brock from Georgia State. You added a couple receivers from smaller schools in Chris Patrick Marshall and Cam Abshire from Emory and Henry. Those 2 guys have some juice on the outside. They've also gone out and got one of the best offensive tackles in the country from App State. On defense, that's been a problem for a couple of years now, where they've had a bunch of good pieces on defense that have left, or good pieces on defense that have been banged up, and as a result, they've been just very up and down. Well, they fortified their front by going and getting 4 different guys that all played at a pretty high level in the Power 5 along the line of scrimmage. Those guys are all coming in. One's from Vandy, one's from Colorado, one's from South Carolina. You have a handful that have played at a high level before, and now they're going and kind of having a chance to be in a pretty good spot. They've added pieces in the back end defensively. They have at least, this is as of this moment, 30 portal additions this offseason. That brings more than 16,000 career Division I snaps onto that roster. And if you talk to people that are familiar with the people they brought in, people are saying that Oklahoma State's going to be a big bounce back team this year. So I want to tip our cap to the Pokes for what they've done here this offseason and kind of flipping that roster and hopefully getting things back on track for Mike Gundy. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Continue to encourage all you guys to like, rate, subscribe to the show. Wherever you get the show, we always appreciate the support that you've shown us, and we promise that we're going to continue to churn out content that you guys will appreciate, including our top 10 quarterbacks in college football. We will release that list on Monday. Now that the dust is settled, we kind of know where guys are going to be. There was one guy that was in our top 10 that is no longer in our top 10 because we don't think he improved his situation. Now that we kind of know who's going to play where, we were able to put together our top 10 list, and we will release that on Monday. So check back with us here in a few days, and we look forward to having probably some passionate discussion about what 1 through 10 looks like. So for all of us here at Always College Football, from Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.